Hello, welcome to a brand new series of the Midnight Quill podcast. In our first episode of Series 2, we're talking about self-publishing. I'm one of your hosts, Tegan, also known as TC Emerys. I'm a writer, professional ghostwriter, and fiction editor. My debut short story collection, The Weight of Rain, was released last year.
Hello, I'm Ashley Amber. I have a YouTube channel where I make other tube videos. I'm also the author of The Flip Side of Sad.
I'm Roxanna Revell. I'm a British indie author. I released my debut novel Because of Hattie last year, and my next novel, which will be the first part in a three-part dystopian series, The Beneath, will be out on the 30th of April.
To kick off this series, we're talking about self-publishing more generally, and our next few episodes will take a closer look at marketing, releasing, and getting reviews. What would you two say is the main reason an author may want to opt for self-publishing rather than traditional publishing?
For me, I think there's many reasons that drives people. I know some people just write a book thinking, I want to see if I can do it. And then, hey, I'm going to publish it myself and see what happens. And then their journey begins. I started looking into it. I mean, I really just started writing because I wanted to see if I could do it as well. And then I'm thinking, okay, if I'm going to go down the publishing route, I need to have a look. And yeah, everything I found online was just pointing towards self-publishing, really, for multiple reasons. My understanding is that these days you pretty much have to do all the marketing yourself, especially if you're not with one of the really big companies. And it's like, well, what are they doing for their percentage if you're doing all the legwork and all the marketing and that all the hard elements of it, really? Because obviously writing the book is the easy part, really. It's getting out. It's the hard part. What do they get for their money? And then Amazon does make it really easy these days, doesn't it? So
yeah, I think that's the thing that maybe some people don't realize, is that unless you get signed with one of the big five, like, who is it, Penguin, Random House, the big companies right off the bat, which is super unlikely, you have to do all the legwork just like self-publishing anyway. I mean, I'm sure they give you a tiny bit of help with marketing, but they expect you to come with social medias already set up and like an idea of how you want to market the book. So yeah,
some of the smaller ones as well, because I did start looking. They will pretty much guarantee that they'll take your book on, but they'll read it first and then decide how much you need to contribute to the work that they need to do. So you're also being expected to put in a big financial contribution, which is probably more than you would put in if you were just doing it yourself anyway.
Yeah, and I think it's good here. We should probably talk about the difference between traditional and hybrid and Vanity Publishers. So if you're a new author just looking to get started, you might see these things that we call Vanity Presses, which are essentially they ask for quite a big lump sum upfront, claiming that it's for the costs associated. Whereas a traditional publisher should be paying you an advance and then taking a cut of your royalties later on. So don't fall for vanities. They're just there to try and catch people out, basically.
Back to what we were, like, the first thing we were talking about. A reason that authors might want to self-publish is because you have full control over what you're doing compared to traditional publishing. I've seen so many traditionally published authors say that they lost a lot of control over their stories.
Yeah.
So to self-publish, it's doesn't seem as like fancy as traditional publishing, but you're going to keep full control over your entire project. So I think that's the most important thing for authors or artists. So that's the most important thing, to keep as much control over your art as possible.
Yes. So I saw in one of the groups on the Instagram, one of the monthly writers challenge, somebody was talking about a publisher and content that they had wanted taking out. And as an indie author, you can put whatever you want in there, can't you, at the end of the day?
It's the same with cover design, marketing, and there's more opportunity for you to write about things that the traditional publishing industry might not consider mass market appropriate, which we should probably do a whole episode about that, to be honest, because they have a bias, especially the big five. Let's talk about the pitfalls of self-publishing. What is the biggest mistake you've made or seen others make in regards to self-publishing?
For me, the biggest mistake I made self-publishing I first self-published a book when I was 17.
Wow.
Think about that for a second. Yeah. So the biggest mistake I made back then was self-publishing it. because I was not ready to do it. I was
Yeah.
way too young. I thought, I could write, but I couldn't write. I definitely should have waited and done the rereading and editing and all that stuff.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's such a huge learning process. Do you think that if you could go back to when you were 17, do you think you would have spent more time learning about the process before self-publishing, or do you think you just would have been like, not that book?
Oh, that's hard. I might have. If I really knew what I was doing at the time, I probably would have taken the time to learn more.
Yeah.
But like I said, I was 17. I probably was not going to do that. So.
You don't always do it right when you're in your 30s either.
Yeah.
I can put my hand up and say that.
Well, this is something that me and Roxanna have talked about a little bit, because you wrote a post on my blog about all the things that you did wrong the first time, I suppose, and the things that you want to do right the second time. So
yeah. I think the main thing is you've got to know you can't do it in a bubble. I think you're an independent author, but you need people around you to help you. Even if I've met people that self-edit brilliantly. I'm not one of them. And I've met people that don't self-edit well, and there's definitely a difference in quality. For me, I was coming at because of Hattie thinking I want to see if I can do this for myself. When it got to the point where I was thinking, okay, I think I've got something I can do something with. I hadn't done any of the pre-marketing, hadn't built up an audience, hadn't built up any hype, hadn't done any ARCs. And yeah, you're going, like I said in the article, going backwards to go forwards. So that was a definite mistake, not embracing it. And I understood how the world worked. I looked at all the articles. I knew what I had to do. I just didn't do it.
Yeah. I think I was the same really with The Weight of Rain. Like I read about all the pre-marketing stuff that I should be doing, but it's so overwhelming. And once you've finished the project, and like I'd had all my rounds of edits and I'd had a proofreader and like all the things that I needed to get done, I was just like, I just want to put it out. And did shoot me in the foot a little bit, but at the same time it was my first project, and I'm quite happy for it to just stand as like a practice of self-publishing. Like the actual content I'm pleased with, but the way that I self-published it is maybe not how I would have done it. But yeah, so I mean, we talked a little bit in the blog post about what you're doing the second time around, Roxanna, so maybe you can give some tips for the listeners, like what are you doing differently?
We're having a book out there already, and having done the legwork and creating an audience helps massively, because the people that have liked Because of Hattie have therefore want to read the Beneath, and I've got author friends as well, so there's a whole community that you're part of. So this time, I mean, we're still in the ARC process. There's 19 reviews come in so far.
Wow.
And they're actually all 5-star at the moment, which is pretty insane. I know, it's a bit mind-blowing. That's going to change, I'm sure, very quickly. But so I think there's probably I think there might be 10 more. I actually had a lot more ARCs go out than I planned to, because one of my members of my street team, who read Because of Hattie in the early days, and basically we chat now, she's like a friend really. She runs a book club and asked if I would be willing to let them read it as their March read. And I was actually a little bit scared about it, because when you obviously do the ARC application process, people are giving you their Instagram feeds, they're giving you their Goodreads. You can check out the sort of books that they read, the sort of books that they like, more importantly, the sort of stuff they don't like. And you can have that vetting process, which you definitely need to have. Because that's a mistake I made as well with Hattie. I think I didn't really know exactly how to position it exactly. And there were some people that I got on board to read it and it wasn't their cup of tea. And because of that, I got some lesser reviews on that one. So this time around, it's very different. I've got people that want to read it because they've read the previous book. And I've got the ARC reviews coming in, drumming up that excitement and buzz as well. So that's definitely something I didn't do last time.
That's brilliant. What about you, Ashley? What do you think the pitfalls are?
So this time around, I did things a lot differently this time around than I did the first time. I also didn't do any of the like pre-marketing stuff, or I didn't do you guys, so Roxanna's pronouncing it ARC. I pronounce it ARC.
I say ARC as well, yeah.
You say ARC.
I say ARC, yeah. It's one of those things that, like, if you've only ever seen it written down, you never know how other people are going to say it. Are you going to say ARC or ARC? Yeah. Advanced reader copy for our listeners. That's what we're talking about.
Yes.
But yeah, I didn't do ARCs at all. I didn't even know that was a thing way back then. So I did that this time around and have been getting like reviews and stuff in, which is cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, just all the pre-marketing stuff. I didn't do anything last time, and it resulted in no sales, basically.
Yeah.
So pre-marketing and ARCs and things like this, like podcasts and interviews and all that. I wasn't, for me, it wasn't my type of thing to do something like this when I was 17. I was not. I've become a lot more like outgoing. As I got older. That was like 10 years ago now. So doing things like this is really important. If you're the type of person who doesn't mind doing it, it'll really help with your book, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the episodes we've got coming up this series is all about social media marketing, and we talked a little bit about like this idea of author branding, because it is really difficult to sort of, I mean, I'm only putting my voice out there really and the occasional selfie, but like you're on YouTube, and like it is really hard if you're not that kind of person who finds it really easy to be outgoing and sort of take videos of yourself talking about writing.
Everyone's doing TikTok reels at the moment. I joined TikTok, but I have no idea how to use it, or to actually
can't
sit there,
do
film
it,
myself, and then edit it and not go, oh, but I hate how I look, I don't want to do it yet.
Was like super against TikTok because I don't like to like follow the trends.
Yeah.
But now that I have TikTok, it's actually a lot of fun. If you are someone who can think of creative little like skits and things, it's actually a lot of fun. So I would suggest looking through it and giving it a try.
I've seen some really good ones. I just don't know if I could do it myself.
Ashley, you made a good point about pre-marketing ARCs. So this brings me on quite nicely to if you could make a tick sheet for new authors, what would you put on there? Like a pre-self-publishing tick sheet?
I would take it way, way back to not just to self-publishing, but before you even start writing, because I've seen so many bookstagrammers go on to write their own books, and they have already got an audience of the people that are following them because of their reviewing. They've joined multiple street teams for other indie authors where they've promoted their work and reviewed their books, and they've already got those people willing to do that for them in return.
That's such a good idea.
And if you've got the time and you can plan ahead and you know you're going to write a book in a year's time, or be at a position to start talking about it in a year's time, I would say become a bookstagrammer. Get on the internet. It doesn't have to be under your author name. Get on Instagram under a different name. Get reviewing, get joining the street teams, get an audience interested in you and what you have to say from a reviewing perspective. And do the groundwork with the other authors, and they are going to be turning around and doing it for you as well. And you've already done half the battle for the marketing there as well.
Yeah, that's a really good idea, actually. I mean, I do some bookstagram stuff, but I'm not very good at the whole, like the really aesthetic book stack.
I'm not very good at that side of it.
Terrible at it. So
in terms of checklists though as well, I think I watched a little bit of a podcast on Goodreads and how to utilize Goodreads. And I see a lot of people who are promoting a book to get ARC reviews and they haven't yet listed it on Goodreads. And I've just sort of like put an event up as well for the release and trying to figure out and try to utilize it to the best this time around. But Goodreads as a tool I think is often underutilized as well. So
on a different side of that, aside from like marketing, I think a good tick list would be, I always say this, to proofread it, edit, rewrite, proofread, edit, rewrite, and just keep doing it, because I always like the thing, like I said, I was 17. I basically self-published the first draft because I didn't know what I was doing. So now that I know all these things, now I know enough to go back. And even when you think the book is ready to publish, it's not. That's what I learned.
Absolutely.
You have to always go back and rewrite again until you really feel like there's nothing else that you can do to it.
That actually leads me on to a lovely plug for episode 2 of this series, which is called Self-Editing. And we're going to have 3 professional fiction editors talking about how you can edit your own work before you send it to a professional editor, which you need to do as well. Get a professional editor.
Definitely. I personally have got my brain, when you're so familiar with the work, you skip over things. I miss so many obvious things. due diligence is definitely something to look out for. There's obviously going to be multiple book titles of the same title, but again, amongst a group of author friends, one of them was working on a new release called a specific name about a specific thing, and I literally happened to see a book of the exact same name with the same genre, the same sort of trope come up. I was like, oh, okay, might just let her know about that, because I guess it was a different thing completely then, and it's just the same name. It's not necessarily an issue, but they were so closely related, it was obviously going to become an issue.
You don't want to get sued.
So definitely do a little bit of due diligence and research about book names as well, just in case.
There's a stigma about self-publishing that I think we should get rid of. For example, I've heard other authors saying that self-publishing isn't as brag-worthy as traditional publishing. So let's discuss that.
It's the approval level, isn't it? I was good enough that somebody wanted to publish me, so therefore, yeah.
To be honest, I kind of thought, like, after I did the whole self-publishing thing when I was younger, I kind of moved on from that. And then I was like, oh, maybe that, I shouldn't have done that. Maybe that wasn't, because the thing about self-publishing is that, yes, you keep control, but you do lose an audience. That's what I've learned. You don't get as much of an audience as a traditionally published book. That's just, unless you majorly have a way of majorly marketing it somehow, you're not going to get the same audience. And that's what sucks about it. So I did once think that, and that's why I moved on to wanting to traditionally publish my book series. But then I got the idea to like self-publish just this little short story that I wrote. And I realized how much I do like self-publishing because, again, I keep the control and I can do it on my terms and stuff. So yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. I was part of a Facebook group. I probably still am. I just don't look at it. And there was this man, and I think somebody had said something about imposter syndrome, or at what point do you feel like an author? And everyone had made a load of comments. And there's this one chap that came up and said, for me, I wouldn't be able to say I was an author unless I was traditionally published or signed to a publisher. That's my standard of what makes you an author. And obviously everyone piled in. And he was like, this is just how I feel. You may set your standard lower. I'm like, oh, okay. And I just went in and
what
said,
what arsehole.
Yeah, exactly. He really was. And then my reply was, to be honest, if somebody leaves me a review or contacts me to say that they felt every emotion that I put into that book, they loved it, it's one of their new favorites, that to me is a sign that you've done your job right. Because you've made that person feel, which is what we all want to do at the end of the day. And this guy was like, oh wow, that's your opinion, kind of thing. So, well, surely that's everybody's aim, because even the traditionally published books don't always win everybody over at the end of the day. No book ever will, but yeah, they generally do, they go for the safe bet, really, don't they? The things that are already similar to something out there, or on trend. But there's definitely is a stigma, because I contacted, I was doing like a load of rounds, like on Instagram. I don't think there is. The bookstagrammers will be willing to eat anything, or really, they will read it if they think it's interesting. But I contacted someone from Prima to see if they would be willing to review, and I mean, she replied, which is nice of her, but it was, I don't review self-published. Because she obviously assumed that I'm either, I think it's because people assume that you've gone to self-publishing as well because you've been rejected and you didn't succeed down the traditional route. What people don't always know is didn't even try to go down that route because you made your own decision for whatever reason not to.
I think that's the change that's happening in the industry, is that a lot of us aren't even thinking about traditional publishing. We're going straight to self-publishing. And something my co-host Maddie MJ Glenn said when we were talking the other day, if you do everything right, you research your cover design, you get professionals in to do the editing, and everything that needs to be done to bring out a book, readers aren't going to know that you're self-published. There's no great big button on Amazon that says this was self-published, so if you've got the reviews, you've got a decent cover, you've got all the stuff that you need to have, to any reader that comes across your book, it just looks like a book. And I think that's the difference that's happening now, is that there's like a line that's blurring between the two, And Bookstagram has been a huge help for that, because if you can get a book with a decent cover that looks, looks nice in a paperback or whatever, and a big Bookstagrammer takes a picture of it, none of their followers are going to be like, oh, that's a self-published book. They're not gonna realize. So in terms of it being like brag worthy, and like you're saying with that guy, I mean, if that's his bar for what is worth talking about in terms of being an author, that's fine. But when you then put that onto other authors, you're just being a judgmental dickhead, to be honest, because
which is more or less what everybody told him.
Exactly, because I think a lot of people think that it's more brag worthy because it's harder work, because obviously querying agents, and then you got to get an agent, and then the agent's got to get you a publisher. All those things are difficult, but I don't think that people realize how difficult self-publishing is as well. It's all hard, Roxanna said earlier, writing the book is the easy bit. Bringing it out, marketing it, and then like continuously marketing your book, future books, whatever else comes next.
I did read an interesting article that said, when you are an indie author, you are the CEO of your company. You are the finance manager, you are the marketing manager, you are the brand manager.
Yeah.
You wear every single hat. You make all of these decisions, usually by yourself, usually on a very limited budget.
Yeah.
Surely that in itself is bragworthy, the fact that you have actually gone out and done it on your own.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, I feel like people feel like self-publishing is like the easy way out, and it's the complete like it's anything but. Like, it's the complete opposite. It's like you said, it's your own CEO. You're doing everything compared to traditionally published. The publisher, once you get to that point and you send your book, you're doing promoting too, but the publisher is making the book and sending it out and doing all that. And self-published, you need to do literally everything.
Yeah, there's so many things you have to think about. And I think another thing is, when you are traditionally published, I mean, we're sort of talking hypothetically here because I've never been traditionally published, but I suppose there's probably a mental load that is lifted, that feeling of like sending it in. You don't really have that with self-publishing. It's always on your mind that you've got to be like promoting or doing something to do with, even like The Weight of Rain has been out for half a year now, and I'm still like thinking about it all the time. So
I think the flip side as well, though, is when you are contracted to a traditional publisher, you've got to perform. They've taken that chance on you, and if you don't perform, then they won't be repeating that chance.
Yeah, exactly.
You can be picked up and dropped just as easily. You only answer to yourself when you are self-published.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's hard enough, really, isn't it? Because we can be our own worst enemies.
Yes.
Doing good enough, but
drop yourself.
Being
dropped
would be absolutely awful. Signed might be a bit amazing, but then if you don't perform, then
yeah. Ashley, I expect some of our listeners have questions about querying literary agents for traditional publishing, and seeing as you have a little bit of experience with that, I was just wondering if you could weigh in on that.
Querying, it's an interesting thing. It can be tough. I did do some research ahead of time to find, the right agents to query and how to form the query letter. And there is a lot that kind of goes into it. And if you don't do it right, it might not work. And so something that I've really learned is that when you're writing a query letter, to just completely be yourself and put your personality into it, because otherwise it's going to seem robotic. Like, this is my book, this is what it's about, and just go. And especially if you can play off, like if you read like an agent's bio and what they're looking for, play off that completely and be like, I see you're looking for this, and that's cool because that's what I'm looking for, and just put your own personality into it, because otherwise you're gonna just seem like any old query and they're gonna just kind of look past you. So
I have to confess something. I did query this time round. I wasn't. But Angela Mack, who was one of my beta readers, said, do it. It's a really good book, do it. And I think I went into it a little bit half-hearted because I had my plan and I had my timeline and I wasn't going to deviate from it. But I did still try.
Did you get any replies, either of you?
Yeah, replies, just to say no.
I've gotten more no's than anything. Some don't reply, and that's just them. A few maybes, but in the end they were no's. I think something weird that happened once was that I sent a query and 8 minutes later got a reply saying that it was
Yeah.
that, like, that's not cool to me.
No,
Like,
they
I feel
didn't
like
even read
didn't
it.
read it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So like maybe I understand, like maybe you can't fit me on your, whatever, you don't have room for me, whatever. Just say that. Don't be open to queries then. Because if you're gonna reply that quick, then you seem odd. Like that, I don't know. That was weird.
See, that seems more like a bias or something. That's really rude to not even sort of.
You can put so much. They want like a certain amount of space as well. You have like a page or so many words to detail your synopsis.
Yeah.
Or they'll ask for a few chapters, and you can't necessarily determine the entirety of a book based on the first few chapters. So it is a bit of a strange one anyway. But the way I see it right now is when I'm looking at the reviews I'm getting is your loss. So
Yeah.
Yeah, a reply I get a lot that seems a little more genuine. Like sometimes you get a reply, you might know, Roxanna, but it just seems like pre-written.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So a reply I got a few times, but it seems like they really mean it, is that they say they weren't pulled in by the first few pages. And it always frustrates me because I have gone back and rewritten it a few times and then queried it again. And they still say it. And I'm like, so what is it that I'm doing wrong that they're not getting pulled in?
The problem is that I think it's almost subjective, because if you think about all the books that you pick up in your lifetime, like there are ones that I know other people love that didn't pull me in. I mean, my friend and co-host Maddie, she loves Dickens and I can't stand Dickens, so like sometimes you just have to think, well, maybe it's just not the story for them.
Where the Crawdad Sings, I've never read it, but the divide is really there, isn't it? People think it's beautiful, some people think it's ridiculously slow and boring. So as much as you think you can do your research as to what the agent's looking for, God, you could even just pick them up on a bad day,
Yeah.
I think it's hard to say what a story will be, and there's necessarily, you don't give your whole book away in one page, do you, at the end of the day?
You would hope not, yeah. Otherwise there's not much point reading.
Everything that's going to happen, don't bother reading anymore,
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks both for sharing your experiences with that. I don't have any experience with querying. So for our final thought, the big question, do you think you can actually make a living from self-publishing your books?
You see, I do have an answer for this. It really depends on how cheaply you can live. Honestly, there's people that have done it, but I think it happens over time.
Yeah.
One of the things I learned early on is you have to sell books. So in some cases, the people that have read my arc of The Beneath have gone on to buy Because of Hattie.
Yeah.
And vice versa. But with that in mind, 6 to 10 years to make enough books to make it profitable. There are people that follow the Kindle churn them out pattern.
Yeah.
Like literally a book a year, a couple of books a year. And I don't want to necessarily be derogatory because I've read some of them and they aren't necessarily original or unique. They are fitting a trope that sells. But then I guess if you look at the amount of reviews they've got on Instagram or Goodreads, that's a relatively good indicator of how many they're selling. So yeah, I think the dream obviously is to be able to write for a living, but it's not going to happen overnight. It's just something from my front door. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you've absolutely hit the nail on the head, but I would add to that. There's two things that you said that I want to reply to really. Firstly, about the like churning it out Kindle thing. I'm in a group called 20 books to 50k, which is really useful. But I think if you're gonna do that, they call it like rapid release. So you can release a series of novellas over the course of 6 months or something. If you're going to do that, you need to know what you're doing, number one. And I think you need to like be prepared to write mass market and maybe under a pen name, which is kind of what I do with my ghostwriting. A lot of my clients are using pen names and rapid release, and they make a living that way. They're not making art, but they're making a living. And I think if you're someone who needs to write something for the art of it as well, then maybe have like a few different pen names, make art and make money. And they're all perfectly valid ways to be an author. The other thing I would say is don't have all your eggs in one basket. I'm not just talking about pen names, I'm talking about like diversifying your passive income really. So like I've got a blog, I've got the podcast, All of these things take time to build up and make money out of them. But if you're just like, the only thing I'm going to make money out of is my own books, then you're going to be waiting a long time to see profit, and it's going to be really disheartening. So diversify your passive income. That's a really like buzzwordy phrase, but
it's time as well though, because at the end of the day, if I guess the difference between being an indie and a traditional is if you have got that advance coming in, you might not necessarily have to have the day job, and that's your time for writing. Whereas the majority of people that are going down the self-published indie route have got many more demands on their time, which, you know, affects how quickly you can get a book finished. You know, if you've got that dedicated time, you can get a novella or a couple of novellas out a year, maybe even a couple of novels. But yeah, if you're fitting it in around the rest of life, then it's not necessarily, and especially if you are going down the additional editing route, because, you know, that can take a month, especially for a big novel. So yeah, there's obviously the time element you have to consider.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Like Roxanna said, some people do it. I feel like you just have to be really committed and find, like we talked about, find other routes of income. Like I do YouTube, but I don't make money off that at the moment. It, like you said, it takes a while to build up. So just find all these, because you're not, honestly, you're not, unless you, like I said, unless you really put the work into marketing and sell a lot of books and find ways to promote it, you're not probably going to make a living off it. You need to find other things that will, and they all coincide too. So like I make YouTube videos, I promote the book, it all, everything can coincide. So you can, you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, yeah, it's everything feeds into each other. And I think one of the most frustrating thing about marketing is that you don't always know what's working until it's not working. So like, I don't know how many books I sell because of this podcast. Like, people might listen and then go to the description and pick up my book, and I would never know from my Amazon like stats that that's where they've come from. It's really frustrating.
It's not an overnight thing at the end of the day, is it?
Exactly.
It's time to build up.
Yeah, and I think if you imagine yourself just like sitting at a desk writing every day of your life, and that's being a self-published author, it's kind of not really. You do so many different things, so many different hats on, the editing hat, the marketing hat, the like Instagram post hat, you know, like you got to be prepared to be lots of different people. It's a business. It's not just sitting and writing. So I think we talked about everything we wanted to with regards to self-publishing and a little bit about traditional publishing and querying. Thank you very much for listening. Please subscribe to us on YouTube and follow us on Spotify. Leave us a comment and a like. We try to get back to as many of the comments as we can. You can support us on Patreon for as little as £1 a month. There's lots of cool merchandise on there made by our fantastic artist, Luna Bird Art. You can get yourself some bookmarks, some stickers, and more coming soon. You can also vote for upcoming episodes. Thank you very much to our two guests today, Roxanna and Ashley. Roxanna's book, The Beneath, is coming out on the 30th of April, and you can go and pre-order it on Amazon now. And Ashley has a book out at the moment, The Flip Side of Sad, which is also on Amazon, so go and buy yourself a copy. Thanks very much for joining us today and speaking about your experiences. And listeners, we'll see you next time.